Hey everybody, this is Colt. Let me tell you about a project that I've been involved in that is making hats. And I just laser engrave messages, images, whatever on leather, patch it on a hat. And this has been a really fun thing for me to be involved in. Head over to reformationhats.com. And if you have an idea of something that you would like to see on a hat, project you'd like to do, let me know. I'd work with you on that. It'll be fun for us all. reformationhats.com. Check it out. Hey, everybody. Welcome to RenewalCast. Glad you are with us today. We have a special guest with us today. Justin DeBerry is with us, and we are going to talk about parenting today. Justin, would you just take a moment and share with us a little bit about yourself, about your family, about your ministry? We'd love to hear a little bit from you. And I know you've been on the podcast before, but really want to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate you guys and your ministry. And I've been at West Center Baptist here in Madison, South Dakota for almost 9 years. The ministry has been great. Lord's blessed it. And we're enjoying life here in Madison. My wife, Carrie, and I have 4 daughters. So oldest is 13, then about 12, 10, and 8. So they're all pretty close together. But we're enjoying life with them, and it seems to be going fast and slow at the same time as far as parenting and the season that we're in. It's really a sweet season. I think we've talked to older people who have gone through all the seasons, and between kind of babies, toddlers, and teenagers can be a really sweet time. We also think teenagers might be a really fun time. We're not afraid of that, despite what we have heard and what many people say. We're looking forward to it. We like our kids, thankfully. We love them, but we also like them.
We're going to ask you to help us out on some parenting today. I know you've taught that at your church some. We can maybe link to some of that. But to start here, why is bedtime such a rough time?
Because they're sinners. And you're a sinner. Let's all get in the same room for, I don't know, at the end of the day when we're all tired. I suppose it's a recipe for disaster. I think Jim Gaffigan talks about it as a hostage negotiation situation, going to bed. You ask them to go to bed and get ready for bed, and they look at you like they've never done that before. They have no idea what to do. And what are you going to give me? What am I going to get out of this? To brush my teeth. I think what's helped us is structure. So just in our situation with our kids right now, we say 7:45, that's get ready for bed time, and then lights out around 9:30. So we try to give them some runway there to wind down, no technology during that part of the night in any form. We just can read or play a game together. And we have 2 and 2 in rooms, so they have someone that they're rooming with. But structure has helped. Not that we always keep it. We're all constantly in a battle to try to hold to what we've said and keep our principles. And Carrie and I have conversations about that of like how much flexibility, how much, because we say once you're downstairs, don't come up, and they'll come up. And then it's a battle because we're in a conversation. We're finally having some time for us and to catch up. And so it can be a battle. I also think, and I don't always practice it, but I believe it, and I'm striving toward it, to use that time around bedtime. It is an opportunity because they're interpreting and processing their day and everything that's happened to them. And they need you to be there and to be available and present for a part of that time. Any age, but I think particularly as they start to get older, because a lot of times that's when they want to talk, is like right before bed or late at night, and you're tired and you don't have anything left, but now it's just coming out. They're telling you everything. They're asking questions. And so I think as parents, steeling ourselves, being committed to redeeming that time around bedtime with them, spiritually, conversationally, emotionally, praying, all of those things. Not that you have to feel it's a law to keep. And if I don't, I'm a bad parent, but as a principle and as an opportunity.
Yeah, I like what you said about the wind down time in connection with that. Just the leaving time for the conversations and the questions, and you're not trying to rush some of that in right at the end when they should be sleeping in bed and now they're wanting to stay up and have a conversation. But there's some time built in for some of those things to happen as well.
Yeah. And I think it pushes back into the rest of your day, where if you're so busy and you got so much going on that you're always like bedtime is hurry up and go to bed every night, you don't have that space and that margin to have those conversations with them. And I obviously there's plenty we could all be doing and they're not bad things, but if you're wall to wall every day, it's going to affect the kids and it's going to squeeze out a lot of that.
Maybe back up a little bit, and you have an idea of this already from how you've answered so far, but how should we think about parenting? Is it a job, part of the curse?
Part of the curse, obviously. No, I think God is a father before creation even. It's in his nature as a son eternally. And so it's not the idea of family, the idea of that relationship, not that ours is exactly the same as the father and the son, but I think it's not a result of the fall. The problems are, and the difficulty and how hard it is and how we hurt each other. Yeah. I hear two things a lot of times, and I'm still working myself how to balance it, but God's sovereignty and human responsibility, I think, are very important when it comes to thinking about the calling of parenting. Because like you can say on one side, God is sovereign, and that can lead you to, it doesn't really matter what I do. It doesn't really matter how well I'm parenting them. If they're going to become a Christian, they're going to become a Christian. If they're going to turn out fine, they're going to turn out fine. That's up to God. And then there's truth in that. We know that there is. We can't change their heart. We can't. God has to do that. On the other side, there can be a hyper responsibility of it's up to me to make sure that they have a good life. It's up to me to make sure that everything goes well for them and that they become a Christian. And I think while well-meaning, both of those are errors on the spectrum. And I would hope that parents would be more and more free to, yes, trust in the Lord's sovereignty, but also to think through some of the things that we're talking about today. How can I be faithful to God's word in my parenting? And what we say and do toward our kids and around our kids impacts them incredibly, more than we realize. And that's just the way God has made them. That's the way he set it up. Even an abusive parent or parents, a child will almost 10 out of 10 times choose to go back to their parents than to go with another set of adults who are better caretakers because they're wired. God has wired us to just this attachment to our parents and to reflect and mirror how they treat us. That's how we're going to be, and that's how we're going to view the world. So that, I think, to on the one hand trust God absolutely, but on the other hand not dismiss our responsibility and how important it is and how it affects the whole life.
It's a calling from God, something he's given us. Something
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we hear a lot in the news about there's not enough children in the world. We're not keeping up. And I think the secular myth is life will be more fulfilling if you're not responsible for any other human beings, if you don't have this burden of children, even marriage. It's just, you can live your best life and that's actually going to be more fulfilling. I think that's a lie. I'm not saying it's bad to be single. I'm just saying that I think marriage, children, this is enriching This gives life a deeper purpose and meaning and fulfillment. And God absolutely calls some to be single, and there's nothing wrong and nothing sinful about that. The calling of marriage and parenthood, I think, should be viewed as, not this like terrible thing, but something that actually adds so much richness to life at the end of the day. It's hard, but
So is gardening.
exactly.
You know.
So is farming, so is athletics, so is, to take metaphors from Second Timothy. It's these things that are callings and they're hard, but as we apply ourselves to them, there's a reward.
Are there some fundamental principles that Scripture gives us that helps us with this calling?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys talk a good amount about law gospel. I certainly heard a lot about it in seminary and have hopefully grown in my understanding from being much more law centered in the way that I perceive life to more gospel centered. But that's a great paradigm to bring into parenting, because on the one hand, you have to have a baseline of authority. Life is not going to work if there isn't. And clear communication, clear expectations, first time obedience is something we really try to hold our kids to. That's the expectation, because that's the expectation God has with us. When he tells us to do something, we don't get to say in a minute or maybe or I don't feel like it. And so that's the foundational principle we've tried to instill from the beginning, is like authority is a good thing. It's given by God, and you are under authority. And so trying to hold them to that. And then at the same time, when they disobey, when they do not submit to that authority, yes, discipline, yes, consequences, but also the gospel and pointing them toward Jesus. And so a healthy balance in the home. It's very easy to be law centered because they always need direction. They always need coaching. They're always doing something wrong, or at least inefficient, that's going to cause more work for you. Don't do that. Don't, not like that, like this. No, when you do that, because it's affecting me a lot of the time. And so it can be easily become I'm just barking orders. It's just law all the time. Do this, don't do that. And to create a gospel culture in your home, I think requires much more intentionality. Those indicative statements of God loves you, we love you, and on the positive side of the coin, reminding them who they are, who God is, encouragement, that makes a big difference. And that teaches them something fundamental about God. So I think watching that, even in our own minds, we're very hard on ourselves. And how often are we reminding ourselves and each other of the gospel? So that's a big one, I think, is the law gospel paradigm. Because it's not just do whatever you want because God will forgive you. You love to sin? Well, he loves to forgive. So that's a great relationship. It's not that, and it's not just authority, loving authority.
Yeah. Yeah. After all, we want to address their heart and not just their behavior, but so often we're centered on behavior, but we need to realize that what's in our hearts come out. So really we want to shape the heart. And so how do we go about that? What advice would you give to parents who want to impact the heart of a child and not just outward behaviors?
Yeah. Boy, that outward behavior can be really inconvenient. And I can really want to focus on it. But yeah, our words and our actions are connected to the heart. And out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so taking the behavior seriously, but also, helping them to examine, to see their own heart. Okay, it wasn't just you smacked your sister in the head. It's that you were angry because you didn't get what you wanted and you lashed out in order to get it. James is very helpful. James 4. Of what causes fights and quarrels among you? Is it not this, that your passions are at war within? You want something and you don't get it, so you get angry and murder. And we've tried to let that inform a lot of those conversations. And it can be tempting to just deal with the behavior because that's what's affecting you and affecting the harmony of the household. When somebody got smacked and they're crying and you have 10 things you're trying to do and you're in the middle of something and it's like this, just stop. And that, okay, once in a while, but to take the time to pull them aside and have a heart level conversation and a gospel conversation. It will pay dividends over time if that is more the norm than the exception. And we certainly have seen that, where now we have to watch our kids like saying that to each other and correcting each other. Your heart is bad right now. You're angry. You're sinning against God. It's, yeah, you're right. Okay. Maybe let us be the parents. But it's gotten through, I guess. It's starting to, we're still always discipling them, but I think we've tried to put in that groundwork where it's not just stop doing this thing, it's repentance and faith. That's what the Lord will work through to change you at the deeper level.
You mentioned earlier first time obedience. As they get older, perhaps sometimes they have reasonable objections to why you said what you said. How do they make that appeal without being disrespectful or thinking, oh, mom and dad, they're just dumb, right? How do you help them do that?
That's a great question because you want to create an environment of safety for them where they feel they're treated as people. And I think that's been a big lesson for me and a help for me is to see them as my first neighbors and as persons, not just, I don't know, slaves to do chores or little problems to solve, but that they're people. And so I think you try to create an environment of safety where you can always come talk to us. You can always bring something up in the right way, respectfully, honoring mom and dad. Yeah, I think that's a culture thing that it shouldn't be fearful in a bad sense. It shouldn't be, you're going to get, there's just a short fuse. And if you don't do exactly what we say when we say it, there's going to be anger. There's going to be, I think the first time obedience, especially when they're younger, is pushing on that. I just feel like doing what I want to do. And I heard you say, get your shoes on. And I chose to just ignore them. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep playing. But I think as they get older and maybe you're wanting to open up those communication lines even more, and we tell the kids, hey, you can appeal. You can make a case if you think we're being unfair or you think that's, and maybe it's a good sign of a safe environment, but they do challenge us a fair amount. And that doesn't make sense because you said the other day, shoot, I think you're right. I did say that. And then you have a chance to be humble. Own it. You're right. I'm wrong.
How do they go about making that appeal? You make the initial statement, do this.
We haven't put it in writing. No.
Have a form.
Yeah. Is this notarized? No. Take it back. No. Just conversation, just like in the moment. And sometimes if it's a bigger thing, they'll just say, can we talk to you about something? Or can I talk to you about something? I think the proactive part of that of, hey, you can always bring something up to us. We are fallible. We want to hear from you if you have a concern or you think we're being unfair. Trying to be proactive of saying those kind of things. So I guess it's not a particular process or anything like that. It's just giving them the freedom to say that.
Where does spanking or grounding, where do these things fit in all of this?
Yeah, another big principle that I think is very helpful is the idea of discipline rather than punishment. Because as God relates to us as his children, he never punishes us because Jesus has taken all of the punishment, all of the wrath on the cross. It would be wrong. It would be unjust. Does he discipline us? And does discipline fun in the moment? No. Hebrews says that very clearly. But those who are trained by it will see the peaceful fruit of righteousness. So trying to approach the kids and even talk to them on that level of, we're not punishing you. We're disciplining you because we love you. We want you to know that sin is not okay. It's not something to be taken lightly. And we're just like, eh. So we corporately, physically disciplined our kids. They were younger. And we always tried to frame that in the context of loving discipline and never wanting it to be excessive, never wanting it to be where we're actually deeply hurting them physically. Of course not. But it does have to be on some level like they feel it, or else there's no point. And that's, I think, for every family and parent-child to work out what that looks like. But we found it to be very effective. Proverbs, I think, informs that in terms of the rod. It's some sort of physical correction. Even some of the translations will say physical discipline when as a translation for the rod of discipline. So we felt, okay, that seems to be God's wisdom, and applied it differently to each kid because each kid responded to it differently. Some are like, yeah, what else you got? I didn't feel that. I'll never feel that. You could bring a horse whip in here. I wouldn't care. And some are like, you just look at them sideways and they're melting. And so you take that into account and, okay, what is going to serve the child? So God disciplines us sometimes physically. I feel like that's a biblical principle, grounding, or go to your room. It's like an exile. Think of Israel, and you have to be away from all the blessings and goodness of the family for a little bit. And so I think there's a place for that, definitely.
The room for some creativity to the crime sort of thing. I remember some have to, sit in the chair with their arms around each other when they're fighting. But that kind of
that's a good one. I'm sure you had some laughs watching that unfold. They don't want to look at each other. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we have godly friends who do things in terms of like practically very differently than us. And that's okay. Yeah, I think it's taking the principles and bringing them into your particular context, your personality, your kids. And it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, my dad was a teacher, and he brought that into discipline. When I got caught shoplifting when I was a kid, I had to do so many hours of watching things and reading things, and I just think about how shoplifting affects stores and people, and learn all about the ins and out of why prices go up because people shoplift. And nobody else had on-campus training that I know of, but did several times. Low learner. But,
sometimes
yeah,
experience is the best teacher.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that there's a wind down time in the evening and in your house, and there's no screens of any time during that time. How do we think about screen time in general and parenting, and how do you handle that?
The technology is moving fast. It's very impressive, amazing in many ways. And in one sense, we marvel at it and say, wow, like God has gifted people to be able to do this and create this. I'm 42. I feel like I'm way behind and getting more behind every day. But I also think we've underestimated the effect that it has on us, whether it's just a screen or it's social media. And the research is starting to back this up. Sociologists who are not necessarily of a Christian persuasion are backing this up. But what are the number one causes of isolation, loneliness, depression, anxiety, suicide, over medication? It's so much tied to technology and screens. And that's just provable. So we have really tried to limit that. Our oldest, like I said, is 13. None of them have had a phone or any kind of like device that is theirs ever until the last 6 months, where they had the little phones or the watches, gizmo watches, that you just have a couple of people that you can contact. And that's been helpful just on a practical level. But in terms of opening up the internet, in terms of opening up social media, it is so dangerous. And one of the greatest gifts you can give your kids is a play-centered childhood rather than a phone-centered childhood. I grew up, and you guys probably did too, with a play-centered mentality. We just played all the time. You rode your bike, you did this, you did that. And maybe we had a little too much freedom. Maybe my parents didn't always know where we were. And could you get into things and get up to things? Yeah. But like the things that we were doing were in a way less dangerous than getting on a phone. So that, I think, is a great gift to give them, is to just encourage them to play. It helps their brains develop. They need that. They need the adversity of falling out of a tree and having to work through that. They don't need the adversity of being on Snapchat and having people say terrible things to them that disappear. And it's the emotional and psychological effects are really damaging, whereas getting hurt in the backyard playing actually can be very positive in their development. So I just think, like, we think the line is over here. This is fair. They only get 6 hours a day or whatever of screen time. And my opinion is we need to reevaluate that. We need to push in the other direction, like way less than we think is okay.
Do you think screen time can factor into sexual things? As a parent, you have to at some point have those uncomfortable conversations about sexuality. Does screen time factor into that? And how do we go about those hard
The
times?
conversations we all really look forward to having. It's a little tricky, but look, if they're going to learn it somewhere. And where do you want that to be? From you, as people who love them and hopefully committed to God's word and in a safe environment where they can ask questions. And I mean, that's, I want that for them, not on the bus where a lot of us learned the birds and the bees and all kinds of things that like were way beyond that. But man, we got to take initiative. We have to be the ones to help frame this for them so that when they do encounter things out in the world, they have a paradigm, they have a worldview that they can process it and interpret it. So we've had those conversations at 6, 7 years old, starting to have it, and even maybe 9 or 10, really getting into it. There's a great book. It's called Before I Was Born by Carolyn Nystrom. You can find it on Amazon. But it walks through sexuality, male, female, marriage, sex in a very responsible, helpful way. And this is a good thing we have to teach our kids. This is something God invented, God designed. It's not inherently bad. It's been twisted and perverted like every other good thing that God has created. I think framing the positive side, giving them the positive side, very much helps them to see and pick out the perversions and the deceptions. They need to know the goodness and the design for it. And so, that this social media, and there's so many things that go on, particularly in high school, sending pictures and all that kind of stuff. Get ahead of it as much as you can. And you're going to be in it. Like, stuff's going to happen. You can't hide from it. It's just a matter of, I think, trying to be proactive. There's always going to be a reactive element, but being proactive to have the conversations, even if they make you feel uncomfortable, which, of course, they probably do.
What else you got, Jay?
Someone, I don't remember who said that God made children small so they can't kill us. And Right? Pay them cute so we don't kill them. Why is it such a, you talked about this a little bit at the beginning, but why is it such a battle, the parenting, even though they're cute and we love them?
Yeah. Two sinners trying to live together can be challenging.
So marriage is
Yeah.
has challenges, right? If
Not mine, but
yeah, right.
others maybe.
And if you're
Yeah. We've all had roommates, probably. And at some point, there's probably some tension. It's hard. So I don't know that there's anything magical about like the tension and the difficulty in parent-child relationships. I think that's the basic truth. And we're inherently selfish. We don't want to be inconvenienced. We have idols. We have a cup of selfishness in our heart. They bump it and it comes out. They get angry. So, yeah, but I think the good news is the Lord knows that. He's with us in that battle. He hasn't called us to something he won't give us the grace to walk through and walk into. And so it's not, at the end of the day, bad news for the Christian. It's good news. This can be good. It's hard, but it can be good. It can be sweet. And I would want everyone to believe that, not in an idyllic sense, like we can get heaven on earth, but it can be good and it can be wonderful to see the Lord working in your heart, in your life, sanctifying you, even as he is sanctifying your kids. And that's another principle. As I'm parenting my kids, God is parenting me. And I have to remember that. And how does he want to work in my heart and my life through them, not just getting them to do what I want them to do.
Yeah, that's good.
It's very sanctifying for us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember coming home from the hospital with our firstborn and just being really overwhelmed and thinking about not only caring for the infant and making sure they don't die or fall off the couch or whatever, but also just thinking about their life and all the parenting things that you're going to walk through. What do you tell it to a parent? Say you had to write on a card one hopeful thing for a parent. What's one thing you should remember as you walk through parenting? What would you say?
Prayer works.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes we get so caught up in the day to day and thinking about all of these other things that we don't do that like we should, for sure.
I'm one who can, as we're even talking about all the wisdom, trying to do this well. And that's needed and good and true. I think prayer will have such an impact in your life, in your heart, and also in bending the Father's heart toward your kids. That it's essential and it's the chief act of faith in life in general, but particularly you could say in parenting. And maybe God brings us to an end of ourselves with our kids at times so that we will get on our knees more and say, I can't do it.
What would you recommend for a resource for parents if somebody wanted to dig into parenting or read a book? Or there's a lot of parenting books out there. And there's a lot of weird.
We have found Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Tripp to be very helpful. We found Parenting by Paul Tripp to be very helpful. Shepherding is more the nuts and bolts, I feel like, very practical in establishing that authority and then over time turning into more influence and friendship as they get older. And then I think Paul Tripp's book is those overarching principles and really a focus on the gospel and grace, bringing that to the culture of the family and the home. So that's been very helpful. And then supplementing with different things. Like I said, we've used before I was born and having those conversations about sex, we've used New City Catechism to try to bring catechesis in and that Q&A. Their minds are so spongy. Man, you got to take advantage of that. Get that grammar, get that biblical grammar and gospel grammar into their minds and the Holy Spirit will use it in His timing. But so we've used that. We've used Theology by Marty Mikowski, which is a distilled Wayne Grudem systematic theology down to a child's level. Honestly, we'd all probably learn from it, going through it. And that's a really good metaphor to think about the church. That's very helpful. So it's taking that systematic approach to different subjects in the Bible, teaching them the theology, which helps them then interpret the passages as they're doing Bible. Because you need to be able to have the hermeneutic, how do I understand the parts in light of the whole? Well, in light of the parts. So you're always doing that of like, I'm doing good Bible reading, but I'm also, okay, what is the theology that helps me understand it? I think in my tradition growing up, we emphasized the Bible stories and Bible reading to the neglect at times of what does it mean? What does it mean for me? And what is this? Can I say more about the Trinity than one God, three persons? So it takes time and a lot of reps, but I think you start to see it, like by God's grace, to get in there and that they'll say things and interpret something. You're like, that's really good. Good point. You got it. You nailed it. And it's very encouraging.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate that, and very practical, and a conversation that we're all going to benefit from. I think our listeners will be grateful for this material. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me on. It's a privilege.
Hey, thanks, Justin. Until next time. See you guys.
Okay, cheers.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. You can find more out about us or check out past episodes on the web at renewalcast.com. You can connect with us on social media. For instance, you can go to facebook.com/renewalcast. Have a great week.